Many years ago, when I first graduated college, I was a marriage counselor. I had this unique couple come in. They had been married about 20 years. And first, the wife wanted to speak to me on her own. So I asked her husband if he would mind waiting at the front office while his wife spoke to me first, and he said that would be okay. So she and I proceeded to my office, and we sat down, and I said, "So you've been married for 20 years. What seems to be the problem?" The woman got really loud and really upset, and she goes, "It's my husband. He's the problem. He's driving me crazy. If he continues, I'm going to leave him." And so I asked her, "In what ways does he drive you crazy?" She said, "For the full 20 years that we've been married, he just repeatedly keeps doing these stupid things." She said, "Every single time we go out, all he does is stare at the ground, and he refuses to make eye contact with anyone." She said, "It's so embarrassing." She said, "He also picks his nose in public." And I said, "I see. Is there anything else?" She thought for a moment and she goes, "Yes." She said, "Whenever we're together as husband and wife, he never lets me get on top." She said, "I want to be in control sometimes." So as I was writing all of this down, I nodded to her and told her I understand everything. And I said, "Now we're going to go get your husband in trade places and I'm going to speak to him." So she went out to the front office, told her husband to come on in. He came in the office and sat down. As soon as he was seated, I wasted no time. I said, "Sir, your wife tells me that you are driving her crazy. And if you keep this up, she said that she is going to leave you." My husband said, "What? I don't believe this. For the past 20 years, I've been nothing but loving and considerate to her." He said, "What is the problem?" I told him to remain calm, and I started to go over with him everything that I wrote down. I told him, "The first thing your wife mentioned is that whenever the two of you go out into public, you're always looking at the ground and never go near anyone or make eye contact." And he goes, "Well, there was some things that happened to me in my childhood that my dad told me never to do while he was on his deathbed." And I said, "Well, can you explain this a little further to me so that I can understand what you're talking about?" He said, "My dad always told me never to step on anyone's toes. So whenever I go out into public, I just keep an eye on where I'm walking and make sure I don't bump into anyone or step on their toes." I said, "Oh, I see. Well, what he actually meant by that is be considerate of other people and try not to do or say anything that's going to set them off or make them angry." He looked at me and he goes, "Oh, okay." So I looked down at my paper and I said, "The second thing your wife told me is that you always pick your nose in public." He said, "Well, that's another thing my dad always told me to do. He told me to always keep my nose clean." I told him, "What your dad meant by that is just to not get yourself in trouble or do anything that would involve committing a crime." The man just stared off into space a minute and looked down and just was shaking his head. Well, I just continued and I said, "The third thing that your wife explained to me is that you never let her be on top. She wants to be in control sometimes." The man sat up and he goes, "This is getting serious. Now, this is the last thing that my dad told me to do on his deathbed." He said, "My dad said this is the most important thing." And I said, "Well, what did your dad tell you?" He leaned forward and he told me, "My dad told me in his dying breath, don't screw up."